was a kid, my parents used to travel around a lot for their jobs, and we would end up moving from city to city just about every year, sometimes more. Because of this, I was homeschooled basically my entire childhood. I would do online courses mainly, so I could do them on a computer at home regardless of where we lived. One year, when I was about 12 years old, we lived in a city in the Midwest that I liked a lot. We lived in a neighborhood with quite a few houses. Our house was not too big, but it had everything that we needed. My parents were both away at work one day, and I was home alone doing a history assignment on my computer in the living room. I had headphones in, but I thought I heard some noise at the front door. I removed my headphones and heard somebody trying to open the front door, which was locked. It was roughly 3 p.m., and it was a little bit early for my parents to get home, but I didn't know anyone else who would be there, so I assumed it was my parents, and I got up from my computer and walked over to the front door to unlock it for them. I walked to the door without even thinking it could be anybody else, but when I got about 5 feet away from the door, I looked up and was shocked. My parents were not standing there, but instead, it was a man with grayish hair and sunglasses, standing at the front door trying to open it, and my parents were nowhere in sight. Me and the man made eye contact for a split second. Then, at roughly the same time, I saw the man turn around and run away, and I did the same thing. I ran to the kitchen to hide and ducked behind a wall so I could still see the driveway to make sure the man would leave. He got up and walked about halfway down the driveway, but then turned around and started walking back up. The man then got to the front door once again and began knocking on it this time. I stayed where I was and didn't even think about opening it for him. The man knocked for roughly a minute and then just stood there. I ran to my bedroom and took out the phone to call my parents. I asked them who the man was, and they told me they didn't know who it could possibly be, but if he tried to enter the home again, to call the police. They also told me they would be on their way home, which made me feel a little bit better. As I hid in my room, I heard the front door once again jiggle as if the man was trying to open it. It was a very scary feeling, and I held the phone ready to call the police. But just as I was about to make the call, I stopped hearing the man. I waited in silence for several minutes. After I would say about 2 or 3 minutes, I decided to go back into the living room and check if the man had finally left. But as I got out of my bed, I saw the man walk directly past my bedroom window, which was in the backyard. He didn't see me, but I sprinted out of my room and called the police. I then ran into the bathroom and locked the door and waited for them to arrive. I didn't hear anything as I was in the bathroom, and the police and my parents both arrived about 10 minutes later. When they got there, the man was gone, but they saw marks at our back patio door as well as our front door, which showed the man was trying to break in. They took down the description of the man from me, but I don't believe he was ever found. This story happened years ago when I was a kid. Me and my 2 brothers and sister did all of our school through a home program that my mother ran. It was overall nice to not have to get up early and ride a bus to class every day. We had a whole room down in our basement set up for school. It had a desk for all 4 of us kids and a whiteboard for writing stuff out, as well as a computer down there. It was the nicest room in our basement, which was otherwise a little creepy, but we were kids, so it was natural to think that basements were scary. On one particular day when I was about 10 years old, I was doing math problems at my desk in the basement. My mother, older brother, and sister were away at the dentist, and my younger brother, who was only 3 years old at the time, was in his room, so I stayed home to watch him. I was all by myself in the basement when I heard a noise right outside of our schoolroom. I thought that my brother had wandered downstairs, so I left the room to get him, but when I did, I couldn't find him anywhere down there. I looked all around the basement, but he wasn't there, so I went upstairs to his room to find him playing with his toys. I asked him if he had gone downstairs, and he shook his head no to me. It was slightly creepy because I knew I had heard something, but I just shook it off, and then I went back downstairs to finish working on my math problems. Once I finished, I moved on to do some of my reading. I would say about an hour later, I was reading a pretty interesting book, and I got really into it. But then right in the middle of it, I got a tap on my shoulder. I looked up to see that nobody was there. I jumped up and looked around in disbelief. I looked all around the room and then ran all the way upstairs. My brother was still in his room, and my parents were still away at the dentist. I know what I felt, and it was a clear tap on the shoulder, not just my imagination. I stayed upstairs for the rest of the day and kept the basement door shut until my mother got home. From that point on, I refused to go downstairs alone. Thankfully, we moved 2 years later, and I didn't have to go down there anymore. To this day, I don't know what happened down there, and it creeps me out just to think back on it. I'm a 19-year-old girl who's a freshman in college. But back when I was younger, I did homeschool for a couple of years from age 11 to 13. I don't remember exactly why my parents had me do homeschool then, but it was a nice change up for a few years from going to school every day. Anyways, I was always into music when I was younger, and when I started being homeschooled, my mom signed me up for violin lessons twice a week. I'm not really sure where or how she found the teacher, but he was this guy named Ray. Ray was in his 60s, I would imagine, and was very friendly when we first met him. He had a house about 10 minutes away, in a busy neighborhood, and he did the lessons right out of his own living room. His house was always very clean, and he didn't seem to have much furniture at all. My lessons were at 8 a.m. every Tuesday and Thursday, and we signed up for 2 months of lessons. Ray was a very good violin player, and by the time the 2 months were almost up, I was getting a lot better at playing. I wasn't all that crazy about the lessons, but overall I enjoyed them and it was a good experience. On the last day of lessons, however, we got done early, and Ray told me that we had finished. I noticed he had less furniture in his house than usual, and I mean much less. There were only a few pieces of furniture still up, and several boxes scattered around. I asked him if he was moving. Ray told me yes, he was moving, and asked if I'd help him with a few boxes since we got done early, and he'd give me $10. I said sure, and helped him take a few boxes out to his car. It took us maybe 10 minutes to get it packed into his big SUV, and then he told me to get in and he'd drop me off at my house on his way. I got inside, and we drove off toward my house. But instead of turning off onto my street, Ray kept driving past it. I told him that he had missed my street, and Ray started laughing hysterically. This is when I started to get a bad feeling. His laugh seemed sort of nervous, and I just knew something was up. Ray didn't turn around though, he just kept driving. I asked him where we were going, and Ray turned and said to me that he was taking me with him. I asked him where, and he just said again that he was taking me with him. I got more and more uncomfortable as we drove. I really didn't want to go with Ray, and I saw us get onto a large freeway. We drove for a while on that, and I stopped recognizing where we were before long. We drove on that freeway for a long, long time. I wanted to just go home, but at the time I didn't have a cell phone, and I had no way of contacting my parents or anyone. I knew my mom would expect me home by now, but I didn't know how she could possibly find me being so far away. I asked Ray several times where we were going and if he could stop, and he would just always laugh and say things that didn't answer my questions. After driving for what felt like forever, I told him I needed to go to the bathroom, but he told me no. I knew that would be my best chance to get away from him, so I kept complaining to him that I really needed to go. Finally, after probably 3 hours of being on the road, Ray pulled off onto a rest stop just off the freeway. He held my arm as we walked inside, and he walked me all the way to the bathroom and then stood right outside the door as I went in. After I used the bathroom, I heard Ray tap on the door and tell me to hurry up. I didn't want to return to him, however, I didn't want to return to him, however, and I knew the door was locked and he wouldn't be able to get in and get me. So I decided to just stay in the bathroom and not let him in. Ray grew impatient very quickly and started knocking on the door about every 10 seconds, telling me to hurry up and we had to go. I refused to answer him, however. At one point, I heard him telling someone nearby that I was his daughter and we were running late to somewhere, and then gave another nervous laugh. I stayed in that bathroom for almost an hour until I heard the surprising sound of somebody saying they were police. I listened as Ray was questioned by a cop about me, and at that point, I felt safe enough to come out of the bathroom just as Ray was denying being with me. Ray ended up getting arrested right there, and I was returned home. I don't know what Ray was planning to do, but I'm so glad I got away from him when I did.